Well, welcome back everyone to the Vintage Sewing Machine Garage. I came into this room today and I got wonderful, beautiful morning light. The sun is out and I thought, okay, this is going to be really nice lighting for making a video for you. And I walked in and the sun just was coming right through the window. What you see in front of you is an antique, a real antique spinning wheel, and our cactus is blooming. This is a winter cactus that they say blooms, I don't know, 4 to 5 months a year. We'll see how it turns out. But anyway, I wanted to focus today on a video on something that I took apart. I'm going to be putting it back together, and it's for this hard luck case of a Singer 99K. And I've been making some videos recently on it. It was covered in filth. It was stinky and musty. And whoever had it said, I can't do anything with it. And someone had begun to try to take the motor apart. And they had left some parts off. And I suspected that the motor had some issues. And so I checked out the wiring, made sure there was nothing, hazardous that I could see. And I actually had some salvage parts that I found and put them in to basically test the motor. Now I did this without engaging the drivetrain. Remember my approach. When I go to take any vintage machine, I can never make assumptions that it's okay. You just never know. So I don't wake up machines by just turning them on and running them. I highly recommend that you don't either. Unless it's a machine you're getting from someone that you know or someone that can show you, oh, it's been sewing fine and I just need to, they want to reduce the number of machines they have or what have you. So when I plugged it in, it was making a groaning, not a groaning sound, kind of I don't know if it was a grating sound. Sounds are hard to describe verbally, but I wasn't sure about it, and so I decided to take a further look. And so what did I do? Well, I disassembled it. And now that it is disassembled, I thought today, with this lovely lighting here, I do have electric lights that I use for videos, but I really love just natural sunlight. We have lots of sunlight options in our home, so I love doing that when I can. So let's take a look. This is what is this motor? This is the motor that came on the Singer 99. It is the original motor, and it is what is often referred to as a B-class motor, B like Bravo. And this is a design that the Singer company would perfect over decades. I mean, you all know I've talked about Singer and how they would keep things in production for long periods of time. And some people have made fun of that and said, well, they weren't very innovative. They didn't constantly update things. Well, I'm glad they didn't, because they got things, they made money. People loved those machines. They kept buying them. And once you cover the cost of your initial investment in engineering and setting up production lines, I mean, it's just all profit from there, or a lot of profit. So this motor, I took it apart, and when I did that, I was able to very gently and carefully inspect the motor. Now, one of the things you always want to do when you're looking at anything electrical, including motor, and by the way, this motor is not plugged in. No. I was looking at the wires because I wanted to see what kind of condition are the wires in. See if I can pull that back for you. And what am I looking for? I'm looking for cracked and rotting insulation, dry rotting insulation, and I didn't see any. And I'm looking inside different places. Now, one thing to mention to you all, when you are looking at anything electrical, especially something like wires in a motor, one of the things you really got to be careful of is to be gentle. Because these wires are not, it's not like an extension cord or anything. They're very short, and these wires are soldered into place, okay? So don't go crazy with this, because you could take a motor that was perfectly happy and you could actually cause it harm, right? The motor itself is, this is a nice, there's metal inside the plastic housing. So it's a high quality motor. But again, electrical wires that are soldered, they are, shall we say, fragile. Now I'm going to shine this flashlight down, and hopefully you'll see what I mean. So if that will be still for me, where's my little pointer? So if you look down in here, I think we're going to have to get the motor closer to you, because just because I can see it doesn't mean you can. All right, let's see. I'm looking behind the camera to see if this is going to show up for you. All right, if you look down into here, you're going to see, look all the way down, and you see do you see it or do you not? Let's see. Okay, trying to get my angle straight here. All right, you see to the right that brass, you see that brass little ring there? That's actually a cylinder. That's the bushing, okay? And if you consider the brass, if that was a clock, look down at, say, 7 o'clock, and you will see a black wire, and then you'll see the metal part where the jacket is trimmed because it had to be attached. That wire is attached because it was soldered by someone who really knew what they were doing, and in those factories. So be gentle, because wires that are soldered, a soldering connection, especially back in the day, they were using the lead solder, which is more forgiving. You can pop them. It's not like they're welded. So again, be extra gentle. Now, I wanted to show you one of the things, and I'll explain as I start to service the motor. Normally, very often, I don't have to disassemble a motor to do something in terms of maintenance. And what is that maintenance? Well, I've shown you on many occasions that maintenance for a motor is basically cleaning the commutator gently. I remember trying out, I remember watching people, this is years ago when I was first doing this, and people would come up with a way to sand. They would actually take and sand the commutator to make it shine like a penny. I don't do that now because that really shortens the life of the commutator, and it's not necessary. These motors were designed to run. They were designed to run with some tarnish. In this case, you see some black staining. That, of course, comes from the motor brush. It's just, as the motor brush, remember this piece spins, the brushes are pushing against, see if I can line it up properly for you here. The brush pushes against, I don't know if I've ever shown this with the whole armature. That's what this big piece is sitting out. But of course, the motor, as it spins, you have the brushes pushing against, and you get that wonderful creation of power that you need to sew. As the brushes wear, they take a long time, thankfully, to wear, but they do, and you can replace them. But again, you're going to have some of that residue there. And then some people will take and they'll go in, they'll try to clean out all this residue. What I found is that if I just took 99% isopropyl alcohol, which you see in my little, it's an old jelly jar. I like glass for this because glass is heavier than plastic, and it's less likely to go flying and spilling. All right, so what else do I do? I take my Q-tips. I don't advertise for this brand. I normally use generic cotton swabs, that's what they are, but these are the precision tips. They are less likely or less prone to shedding, although they can and will shed as well, but they're just a little more robust, if you will. So I'm going to take, set my brush out of our way here. I'm going to take my jar of isopropyl, and I'm just going to dip each end of the precision tip cotton swab, and I'm going to take it, and you've seen me do this in the past. Sometimes I can literally go down into the brush. There is a brush port, right, and the brush goes down in the top of the actually, I take that back. Many motors have a port with a brush cap, and I unscrew it, and then I take the cotton swab and I go down and I simply turn, I'll turn the pulley of the motor and clean the commutator that way. Because what I'm trying to clean is just this part here, right? You see this part here, it looks like a giant ring of copper, because that's, in a simplistic sense, that's what it is. And this ring, okay, I'm not coming anywhere else. I'm not going to the right. You can see, you notice that the copper is shiny to the right. That's because that's not touched by the brush. The area where the brush is touched, that is where the buildup of the carbon or the graphite from the brush is, okay? This is the only thing I'm cleaning. I am not touching anything over here, okay? Because you have lots of wires, the winding of wires, which is how traditional electric motors are made. And again, how can a motor this old last long like these motors typically do? Well, because of the quality. There's a lot more copper in a motor of this era than there is in a modern motor that you would buy, say the Chinese-made motors, which we have. I'm grateful that these motors exist, the new ones, because sometimes you have to replace a motor and you can't find an original. But nothing lasts forever. But these are, to make a motor like this, and these are consumer grade, right? Industrial electric motors are, of course, they're made well. They have to be. But what I'm doing is normally I just turn it, right? But I'll show you, and you can see the alcohol pulls this residue off. I'm not using sandpaper. I have long ago stopped using sandpaper because, remember, the commutator can last. It has lasted decades. And I think this commutator should have, a lot of life left in it. But if you grind it down with sandpaper, you are significantly shortening its life because eventually it wears out. Now, let's get another one of my precision tips here. If you ever come across a commutator on one of these motors, and you're going to see where the brush contacts, you'll see it very often. There's some wear, right? So if I hold this brush up, if I can hold it still, get it in front of you all. If you look, it's fairly even. Now look at the brights. You see that area that's still bright copper? Very often that will be slightly thicker. There'll be some wear in that gray area where the brush has been rubbing, but I don't see much wear here at all. Remember, this machine's got to be 75 years old or so. And yet, that commutator, look at that thing. It's still not very worn. Occasionally, if I can hold this still and show you, what you'll notice is right here where the brush rubs, sometimes there'll be like a little rut. Think of like the ruts in a road, right? And you'll see a depression there where it's simply worn. I see almost none. And most of your vintage machines will have very little because these commutators and these motors were built just incredibly, okay? That doesn't mean you would use this motor for industrial work. I think that's one of the reasons we often get confused, or people get confused when they think they have an industrial machine. Consumer products are built so poorly now, most of them, that we don't expect things to be made of metal. The first time I ever showed a vintage sewing machine to the graduate school class where I was taking on my first machine, I opened it up. I took the lid off, and people were just speechless. They thought, well, surely this is an industrial piece of equipment. I said, no. It was a Singer 301 sold to consumers, and it's been so long since items like that existed for consumers. That people are really, it's something new that they learn, just like I did. We all get our turn at learning. So what I'm doing is you can decide, how much do I want to do? Eventually, as I keep going with more and more alcohol and swabs, I get there's less stuff coming off here, and you will be tempted to say, well, it's copper. I want it to be nice and shiny. I want to strongly recommend that you resist that temptation. again, when I was first learning overhauling machines, I did it, and the machines ran fine, and I didn't grind them too hard because I was being extra careful, but it's not necessary. And what I'm really basically doing here, I'm just getting any excess that might be on here. Now, sometimes if it's caked on, you'll see your cotton swab will get blacked, really dark. But, mine is just barely picking up anything now. Now let's look at it, right? You see, well, oh my gosh, it's still dirty. It's fine. There is nothing wrong with this commutator. It is not going to slow your machine down. You will see people who still, they go in and they sand the commutator. I've tried it before and it worked, but again, I had to remove some copper to get it back shiny again. You don't need to do that. And in this case, I'm not actually going in with a tool into the little indentations there and removing that. I'm just not, because remember, most of you who have vintage sewing machines, your commutators aren't even this clean and they run beautifully. Electric motors are designed this way because they knew that the brushes would wear and leave stuff on the commutator. So they were engineered this way. The reason I'm doing this is I've got the motor apart for a different reason. I said, okay, I'll just go ahead and clean it while I'm here. But I didn't really take much off because there wasn't much. Most of that is staining. So resist the temptation to get this thing shiny, because you're really just basically wearing out your motor prematurely. Okay, now what else is there to look at here? Before I put it back together, I'll do a separate video on putting it back together so this doesn't turn into an hour-long video. What you're looking at right now are essentially the various parts that I removed. Now, one of the things that you may have seen in other videos I've posted in the past, Singer motors, and I'm not talking about the potted motors because they have their own way to access their grease ports, okay? And I think I've shown that in other videos. But the slant-o-matic motors, the Singer motors that went to like the Singer 301s and some of the 401As, as well as many of the BT motors, what they would have is, just sort of put this here, you would notice, and I think I showed this in a video the other day when I was talking about oil and grease. You see this little space here, that little indentation where the plastic is? The reason that's there is that Singer, for many, many years, would have an open grease port, right? You have the little, it's like a little, looks like a little periscope. It's that little piece of aluminum tubing that would come up and, would sit up like that, right? Looks sort of like, pretend that's not a screwdriver, right? Sort of like that. And you would, and it held the wick. And I've demonstrated in prior videos, okay, this is how you remove it without destroying it. You take out the old wick, you put in the new, you add new grease. Well, at some point, they decided, no, we're not going to do that anymore. It's lubricated for life. Well, not really, whatever that means. So they would use Singer lubricant grease. Now, not sewing machine oil, okay? So in order for me to test a theory, and I don't know that this is the case. In fact, a part of me thinks that this motor may not be salvageable as a motor. I never throw anything away because I always use parts. In fact, one of the parts I found on my salvage, my Fred Sanford salvage yard of sewing parts is from old motors, and I saved them for that reason. So anyway, what I wanted to test is to see when I took this piece out. Okay, remember when a sewing machine motor is turning, when it's spinning, okay, it has to, the ends of the drive shaft, this end, okay, and this end, by the way, is where the pulley goes, and we'll go back to, right? It's, it'll come on here, and there's a set screw for it, and then the other side of the drive shaft is way over here on the left. And this, by the way, has washers. When you take an armature out of a motor housing, you have to be careful because sometimes these washers will stick on the inside. There's my flashlight. They will stick on the inside right up, and sometimes you'll see them sitting right on top of that brass bushing. Sometimes they slip and fall. So you don't want those washers rattling around in there. So, now that I've got this open, I have some open areas. So you may have to look very carefully, and you may even try one of those little, you want to get those out of there, okay, because you need them. Those washers are basically, they're like spacers, okay, so they're important. Don't just say, oh, well, I don't need that anymore. Yes, you do. Now, so what is my main approach here? I'm looking inside. I don't see any dirt. There's nothing. There's a little bit of fuzz there I can do, but this is fairly clean as inside of a motor goes. It's really not. I'm not seeing any real level of filth in here. So why do I want this open? I noticed that when I took the armature out, there was literally no, I'm touching this part here, which is where it would, right in this area here, that's almost in about 3/4 of an inch. That space is where the shaft goes into the bushing. And there was nothing slippery there. I'm thinking, wow. And on this end too, how could it be that dry? This thing it's probably not had any grease since it left the factory. So I thought, all right, is my noise caused by that? And I don't know. I'm literally, you're watching me try to figure this out. And so my assumption, never assume until you've actually verified something. And so what am I going to do? The first thing I thought to do, and I don't know that this is even necessary, but hey, why not? I'm going to take another one of my precision tips, and I am going to dip both ends into the alcohol. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to go into the bushing itself, and I'm going to take the cotton swab, and I'm going in there just to see, there shouldn't be anything in there, but I'm going to see if there is, and clean it. Not much of anything, right? It's just brass. But I didn't know for sure, and I thought, okay, why not? It doesn't hurt anything for me to do that. And then, now this side where the pulley is on your motor, you can actually get to the bushing there, but on the other side you have to go in, because remember, on this end, it's sealed. Okay, so I'm going to come over from the inside, again, being extra careful. Don't knock or flop the two halves of this clamshell around, because there are soldered wires here, and they don't appreciate being handled roughly. So I'm going to take my, and I'm going to come down here, and in this situation I have to go in from the inside. I'm going to take my cotton swab, just put it right in the middle, right in the center of that bushing, and sort of turn it around, nothing. So there's not much of anything in there. And I don't know if that's the cause. It could be another cause. So what am I going to do? I am going to simply take one of my syringes with grease. This is, and if you watch my grease video that I've just released finally after years of people saying, would you please talk to us about grease? I am going to put, now I can put grease on the shaft, right? However, I want to be careful here, because if I get grease on the shaft and I start moving the armature around, I don't want any of that grease to get anywhere else on the inside of the motor. You definitely do not want grease anywhere near the wires of your motor. Do not put grease on your commutator. Do not put grease anywhere except on the two ends of this drive shaft. Okay, we've got to be real specific here. So what I am going to do is, now if you get this, you say, oh my God, I don't want to put this in backwards. You won't be able to on this way, because these are the fins, by the way, of the little fan. As the armature turns, it helps move air to help keep the motor cool. Now, what I'm going to do here, before I put this back in, I have a couple options. I can put the grease on the end of the drive shaft and then put it back in, Or I can take, if my grease syringe is long enough, I can just I can take it all the way down. I got to make sure that um, the tip of my syringe is in right in the middle of that bushing, because if it's not, if I squirt grease anywhere else, you got to clean up on aisle 11, right? You're going to have a really big cleanup. So let me get the flashlight in there. I want you to see this. So the tip of my syringe is going right in the center of that brass bushing, okay? Not on top of the bushing, and no, and don't do that, okay? Do not get grease anywhere else. It shouldn't be difficult, but you want to know this before you go in, because then you're going to have a project. So, okay, I went and got my head-mounted flashlight because I have two hands. Okay, so remember, I'm going to put this tip here. Now remember, this is the end. Don't push too much grease in here because this is sealed, right? I mean, it's not going to hold very much, and we don't want it all oozing out, and because as it warms, it'll soften. Do you really want grease dripping all over the place? No, you do not. So that's one way. If you want to be extra cautious, in fact, I think I'll do it this way. I'm going to put on this end, anyway, I'm going to put the grease, get things where I can actually have you watch what I'm doing. As I mentioned in one of my videos, you know, trying to overhaul a machine live while you're filming it is a little awkward, and it is more time consuming, but I want all of you to see this. Okay, so I'm going to take, I've got a cotton swab here, and I'm going to take, again, I would use, because we're dealing with a motor, let's use the precision tips. They're, again, any cotton swab can ship, but these are better, okay? So what am I doing? Notice that I do not want grease to go anywhere past here onto that commutator. No, no, no. This is why a little goes a long way, okay? And I just put this little squirt of grease, and I'm going to just spread it around this end of the shaft, okay? And if you put too much, you can mop it up, right? I use cotton swabs like a mop. As strange as that sounds, that's what we're doing. We're mopping up any excess that we have, okay? Now remember, some of the grease is going to be in contact with your with any of the washers, and that's fine, because don't forget the washers, they end up going right up against the facing of your bushing, right? Before you go down inside the bushing, there's that, what you see as a brass ring, that's the, you know, that's the edge of the bushing. And so that's great. We'll have a little bit of that grease right just where those two meet, but we don't want any excess. So I'm going to continue. Let me hold it still so you guys don't have it fluttering on you. I'm just going to spread it. It's a film, right? I'm putting a film. Now I know, you know, there's the temptation to say, well, is more not better? No, more is not better. More is bad. Okay. And again, we're all, you know, maybe it's just human nature. We're tempted to do that. Now, before I finish, what do I want here? I'm going to put just a little bit more, and you know, you can put the grease on the cotton swab. As long as, be careful, don't squirt hard or you're going to have grease flying everywhere, and that will create problems. So anyway, I've taken a little bit more on the end here because, you know, I've got grease on the shaft itself, but don't forget that the end of the shaft is going to be residing up inside that bushing, which is sealed, okay? So notice what I did. I put like a little bit of just a little dollop right on the end. Not a giant blob. Remember, there's not much room for this grease to go. And you don't want to overdo it, because that grease, as soon as this drive shaft goes into that bushing, once it takes up space, you know, what are you left with? You don't have a ton of room for your grease, and you don't want it oozing out, falling all over the place, because if it does, you got to clean it up, and it's not a fun time. Okay, just a tiny little bit right there. And the reason I'm doing this is because the end of the drive shaft is going to be pushing against the back of that sealed bushing, okay? And that's all I've got here, guys. That's it, okay? Now I'm going to take this and just and as you feed it, it'll kind of be this section of the motor helps you, okay? Because you know, it's designed just to hold this shape. So you'll know, and there it went, right? It was kind of like here, and I'm turning, kind of wiggle a little bit, and you'll know because there you go. Now, what am I doing? I'm just turning this and spinning it, okay? So let's see. Did I cause any problems? No. So I've got lubrication on the drive shaft. And look there. We've got some. I might add a little bit more because again, start slowly. Do not overfill. Okay? And let's see. So now, the reason some of this grease that was on the shaft, you didn't see it when I pulled it back out, is because the shaft left some on the inside of that bushing, and that's what we wanted, okay? So I'm going to go back, and this is about it. This is the last little bit of thin film I'm going to add, okay? That's all we need. So I'm going to go back. Again, you put it in like this, and the best way to do is you can just do it here, right? And then just hold it by the shaft there, and boop, and you'll feel it, and then you'll feel it go down. And once it does, and if you're not sure on this particular motor design, you can see the fan blades. Oops, careful. The fan blades. You can see roughly, you know, how far apart. I've got at least 1/4 of an inch between the blade and these coil wires. So now what's left? Okay, I need to take care of the other side. Now the other side I can do a little bit differently because it's open, right? It's actually open. You can see from this side. So I can get my hand out of the way here. There we go. You can see the hole there with the bushing. Right? Now I can certainly add lubricant from the outside. However, don't forget that this piece here, this is like a spacer, that piece is going to push against this bushing's top, or that brass ring. So I don't want to just put the lubricant, hands flying around here. I don't want to just put the lubricant here, right? I want to make sure that some of it gets in here, but not a ton, right? So I'm gonna, again, this syringe will push out a lot more grease than what you see here, but I don't want that. No. Less is more here. Okay, so I'm just gonna take this, and I don't need like I say, it only takes a fairly thin film to make the machine happy. Right? When it left the factory, they weren't flooding it. They put the enough that it would last a long time, and it did. But you know what? Decades are decades, and now it's really time to get some more lubrication here. Okay, so I don't need grease on the very end because that's where my pulley is going. I mean, I could, but it's not that necessary. I just need that to be clean. And there's nothing wrong with a thin film of grease on there. It should not hurt the pulley. This pulley is made of plastic, probably a Bakelite type product. Okay, so I'm basically doing the same amount of grease that I had on the other one. You want to make sure you don't miss any of. Now this piece is going to spin, so if you miss a little tiny spot here, it will cover it. It will coat itself once you are once you've had it put back in and the motor's turning. So now I've got a coating of grease here. Now remember, on the other one I did the end, but on this one that's less of a concern because that end is not. The end is basically going to be what we attach the pulley to, right? So here's our plastic pulley, and you can see this is what the it's this is what that shaft is going to go down into. But again, it's not, the pulley is actually attached to the shaft and spins with it. So it's not like the drive shaft is having to spin in the pulley, right? I want to make sure that make that clear. So unlike the other side, the shaft is not going to be spinning in this pulley. So that's why I'm not really worried so much about lubricating this. In fact, where's my little rag here? I probably want to take some of that off just on the very end. And if it's easier, just take another cotton swab, of course, and you can, you know, sort of make sure you don't have a bunch of stuff on there. Okay, so now let's try putting this in and see. Now I'm not ready to put the whole thing back together yet, but I just want to make sure. And of course, it went right there. It went right in to, all right, these are like two pieces of a clam. There's a clamshell design, right? Remember, you've got wires down here, so be careful. Be mindful of what you're doing. And then, of course, this is the bracket that holds the motor to the side of the machine. And the reason it's here is because it's all beautifully wired into my terminal, and I didn't need to disassemble that to do what I wanted to do. Okay, so now, you know, I've got, wow, okay. Now, this grease has not really softened because I'm just taking this back out. It hasn't softened because the machine has not been running with this motor and getting the motor warm, as it will eventually do. So, let's see. So it wants to hold on a little bit. Might have created a little bit of a vacuum when I was. Oh, by the way, if your clamshell is not going back on smoothly, it could be that you've got this underneath the shell. So you want to watch that. This goes on the outside, of course. There. So I just took it right back out. Okay. Now, I have now primed that bushing with grease. Maybe you don't need to prime it, right? But I can see, you guys see this now? Let me zoom in. You should now see where that spacing washer has now left a nice little film of grease right on the ring of the bushing. You don't need grease anywhere else. If you put too much, that grease is going to go oozing off, off into the rest of the machine, of the motor shell. Don't do that, okay? This is what we want. We want that film. That film should last a long time, and that's what we're aiming for. So I will, this time, on this, since I've already coated the shaft, I'm going to come around on this side, and I'm actually going to add just a little bit of lubricant here, right there, right inside the bushing. So that I don't end up with too much grease pushing back all the way towards the motor. I don't really need that. I just want whatever's going in there, I want that to, and by the way, your wires down here on this particular BT motor, the wires are that are leading from the motor, let's give us a little spot there. The wires that lead up from the motor are coming through here, and they're headed to the terminal. That's why they're down here. And there's a plate that will seal all this up later. Now, before I seal all this back up permanently, we have something to notice. First of all, let's make sure that our lovely Singer plate is not, dovetailed underneath. That'll cause problems. So that's out of your way. But you're still not done. Why? Because there is a part, and this is like one of those weird things in Singer machines that when I first did a Singer motor, I did not know it existed. And when it was a Slant-O-Matic motor, and I took it apart, and I thought, okay, that'll be cool. And I did. And then all of a sudden, a part fell out. And I picked it up, and it looked like that. That little piece, it's made of metal. I don't know what kind of metal, but I think it's steel. I can put a magnet on it, no, for sure. But this piece is really important because it goes up here. It actually, when the two tops of the clamshell, I'm tongue-tied today. When those two pieces come together, this is going to sit right there with them. And I didn't know that when I first did a slant-o-matic motor. I was like, what is that? And I had to literally, I searched for a long time to figure out what it was. Well, now I know. Okay, so we've got more than enough in terms of our lubrication, the grease. We're done with the grease, and it didn't seem like much. Look at that. There's a ton left. Again, you can use a much smaller, you don't need a lot of grease, folks. You're gonna, once you get the grease that you need, and I showed that in the grease video, I said it's really simple, right? I mean, you can literally spend the rest of your life looking at all the theories and ideas about grease, and you're certainly welcome to, but I no longer do that because I'm satisfied that I have the right approach with sewing machine oil and grease. If you have a different idea, no, that's fantastic. Please share that. Now, so what are we going to do now? So what I need to complete, I'm going to get this clamshell put back together, and then we will test it. I'm going to test the motor and see if it's still. Now I'm testing the motor without a load, right? I'm not asking it to push the machine to sew something, and that of course makes the motor work harder. But even not under load, even without engaging the the drive shaft of the sewing machine, I was hearing that sound. If I still hear the sound after all this effort of mine, that tells me, it may be something inside the motor's windings, and if that's the case, then this becomes a piece of salvage, and there will be new videos on installing a new motor. I think I've done those types of videos before. Anyway, so what's left? All we have to do now is reassemble. And so in the next video, I will show you how to completely reassemble this motor, and then I'm going to test it. And it could be that all of my efforts were for naught, that it still has problems, but that was the thing I wanted to try. And this poor motor needed lubrication. My God, it was dry. I mean, like, where did it go? I know they did it in the factory. So this was me showing you how to reinstall the armature and get lubrication back on these areas that were dry. And that may not have been causing the sound. But it certainly is going to make it spin a lot faster than it did before. Friction is not always your friend when you're trying to get power from your machine. So anyway, thank you all for watching. If you are new to the channel, or if you have been watching for 10 years, whatever the case may be, I'm glad you're here. And please consider sponsoring the channel. You can donate to buy me a coffee. I love coffee. And I will see you in the next video when we figure out how to put this machine together, this motor together. And we're all gonna find out together, guys. I haven't listened to it yet, so you're gonna see if my theory proved useful or not. But at least, if nothing else, we learned how to lubricate the bushings of a B-class motor for Singer. We'll see you next time.